All right, this is Think or Be Eaten, and we have with us again Larry, the contractor guy, doing a series on the Nazis and all things Nazi. We are what we hated. The intimation there very solidly is that we are becoming Reich-like. We're already there, I think. So he has mentioned from time to time that he'd like to kind of discourse with Andy Colden because of Colden's study in that area. And so we have them both today, as threatened, Larry and also Andy. And Andy, thanks a lot for making time for this. Appreciate you being here. And I'll throw it to you, Larry. You said you had something that you wanted him to process.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Andy basically some questions about UFO technology and the Nazis, and read a brief statement here, kind of give you a background on what I'm talking about. At the Captain Ruppelt, who was the chief of the Air Force in Project Blue Book, made a statement in 1956. He said, when World War II ended, the Germans had several radical types of aircraft and guided missiles under development. The majority of were in the most preliminary stages, but they were the only known craft that could even approach the performance of objects reported to UFO observers. And there was also a statement in the New York Times of that same year, was talking about some incidents that had happened during World War II, and in particular about the Foo Fighters. They said Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Forces, on December 13th, a new German weapon has made its appearance on the Western Air Front. It was disclosed today. Airmen of the American Air Force report that they are encountering silver-colored spheres in the air over German territory. The spheres are encountered either singly or in clusters. Sometimes they are translucent. And one of the pilots said, upon reaching our altitude, the pilot reported, the objects leveled off and stayed on my tail. He went into a steep dive, and the glows followed in sharp precision. He banked as sharply as he dared, and the objects followed. For 2 minutes, the lights stalked the fighter through several intricate maneuvers and peeled off under perfect control, then blinked out. What I wanted to ask you, Andy, is as a result of your research and your experiences, what you may know or what you believe about Nazi UFO technology as being in connection with UFOs. Do you believe that Nazi technology, which was brought over here through Project Paperclip, may very well be the genesis of the UFO phenomenon that we know today?
I think the short answer is yes. But I'd like to know a little more about that last case. Did the translucent item, Foo Fighters, disappear completely? Or was it daytime?
All right, hold on a second, Andy. Again, you're going to have to back off a little bit because we're getting it. It's only when your voice goes up in volume. Do you want to, Larry? Did you get that, by the way, or do you want him to restate that? Okay,
yeah. Well, according to the report, they just kind of blinked out and peeled out, or peeled away from them.
Didn't disappear into thin air?
Yeah, basically. They really didn't know what to make of them.
So they did appear to disappear completely, or did they just go away? Do you know? Do you know?
I honestly don't know. I think they just went away. They couldn't find them.
Andy,
I don't think they wanted to find them.
Andy, would there be a difference that you would ask that because of that of either behavior?
Yes. If it disappears completely, that's more of an awesome weapon. If it's a weapon, okay. Right? I mean, or it could be that it's some kind of natural phenomenon. Those balls of light that people talk about.
Andy, I just was wondering, as listening to Larry, you going back and forth about this. Are we dealing with some kind of cloaking technology, or is that kind of like a Model T Ford compared to where this stuff was at?
Can you ask that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Nobody listens to me anyway. It's okay. No. But when you were asked, I found it interesting. You asking Larry whether or not these things, however long they existed, they pop right out or whatever. And Larry, we're talking about Foo Fighters there. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's the phenomenon that they're talking about.
All right. Before I restate that question, then here's the deal. I've always wondered about this, and it seems like it's impossible. And yet, am I right? I mean, I never got deep into this, but it seems that American pilots have mentioned seeing this, quite often. Am I right in that recollection of this being seen by credible people?
Yes, they were all over the place. And the question, I was trying to get at whether or not, if these things were just seen going away and didn't actually disappear, that's kind of a lower level of threat. If the things can actually disappear, then you have to wonder, what have they discovered? Or if it's a supernatural or kind of a natural phenomenon of balls of light and that sort of thing, which maybe, in the Buddhistic world, they think that those can be people transformed into balls of light, like extensions of consciousness or something. So, that if they can disappear, it just begs more questions about what it is, because you can never really tell with some of these things if they're a military craft, something that was maybe developed under Tesla or took his ideas, versus something wholly supernatural or unexplainable coming from another dimension or something like that.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to talk about today is what do you believe or what research have you done that's indicated that there may be a connection to interdimensional creatures? In my case, as a Christian, I believe that there may be some demonic activity. I'm not putting words in your mouth on that level, but do you believe that there may be a connection to interdimensional creatures?
With Nazi craft or just
with the whole Nazi UFO technology phenomenon. I'm sorry. Did you finish? Yeah,
I'm hearing a little echo.
Sorry.
Okay.
Why should now be any difference? All right, go ahead.
No, I'm saying that possibly the Nazis had some contact with interdimensional beings that may have influenced or taught them something about this technology. I know that's not like a new thought on my part, but I was wondering what you might know or what your opinion might be of that.
Well, if I'll give myself a plug here. I've got this new CD coming out called the Mothman's Hallucination Guide, and this might be a good time to plug that.
Sure.
But I won't.
Well, you just did. Now stop. You are in a feisty move today, Colvin. I wish I was there.
Well, you're getting into my favorite subject. What do these creatures have to do with it? And
right.
And I really don't know. I mean, with Mothman, I kind of whittled it down to something, that's easy to understand, which is that he's not one of the demonic ones. He's more angelic. That's about it. And if there's a mutilated animal, or any kind of demonic activity, these archetypal, or the Garuda in particular, is there to keep it in check. So he's basically a friendly or whatever. So
you believe
but with some of the other creatures, you don't really have a clear-cut idea of what their deal is. And like the Bigfoot, is he just a friendly fellow in the forest, or does he abduct people like some of the Indians would say? I don't know. But yeah, they do appear around these UFOs. But it could be the same kind of thing, though, I'm thinking. Whereas, a first responder kind of deity like the Garuda would come if there was a planetary spirit movement demonic movement. It might also come because of the frequencies that these craft are using or something.
But don't we have a couple of things at play here? Now, Larry, at the end, what you were describing, I mean, what you're reading, that was describing these spheres of light or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's what we consider more or less the Foo Fighters, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, are we assuming or presuming or questioning whether or not the Nazis were in back of that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of speculation that this was, early Nazi attempts. I think the actual purpose behind them, from what I've read from military, people that were giving opinions, was that they were trying to mess with the Allied radar and the engines. In other words, maybe to interfere with the radar and possibly to do something as far as a magnetic field, electromagnetic field, to cut their engines out. Now, whether they were weapons or whether they are some other phenomenon, I'm not sure. That was, it was kind of a question. Most people have heard of Foo Fighters, mm-hmm. and so I think a lot of people have opinions on that. I'm pretty sure, that Andy does. All
right, now, but I have a question too that I'd like to separate some of this stuff out with, and I think it exists to this day, and that is some of this. I mean, we're talking about UFOs in general, but especially as it applies to what the Nazis might have been doing. Mm-hmm. My question is, because, all right, I don't mean to go on and on, but my feeling is they're real. I think a lot of it, or some percentage of it, is not of this earth. And I think there's some of this stuff that is ours. And now, saying that, I had asked you before, Andy, whether or not we're looking at cloaking technology way back when, or as I said before, is cloaking technology like just, some kind of little pissant in the whole scheme of what can be done or what UFOs, are capable of?
Well, I wonder about some of these old stories if they weren't, it wasn't decided really early on that they should be spun as ET. And so the reports themselves of the Foo Fighters might have introduced into them a bit of hyperbole that makes them seem more otherworldly. Because I know that I just read something recently, I think Keel mentioned it somewhere in one of the magazine articles, that these things smashed into the engines of the planes and were taking down Allied planes.
But were they non-discriminating? Did they just not like the fact that people were shooting each other up in the skies?
No, they were from this. It was Allied, so it intimated that these were German weapons.
Okay, so that's what leads that. All right, all right.
And then after the war, the American dude who took over took on his main thing, like his main interest after the war in exotic craft was Lawrence Rockefeller.
Oh, yeah.
And we just to bring it up to something real recent, this week I went back to Point Pleasant, the TNT area, a couple
mm-hmm.
of weeks ago, and we were checking on some water tanks and stuff like that to see what they were, and came across this info along with Ted Torbich, who was looking into it with me, that looks like Lawrence Rockefeller had a big influence on the TNT area, if he didn't outright have the final say about what happens there since the war. And at least up until 84 we know, and probably even till today. In other words, the TNT area may be owned or otherwise controlled by the Rockefellers.
Now, and Larry, I'm going to throw this to you first before Andy. One of the things I've wondered about, and I think this is not a big aha, that we know that the Nazis were advanced, but was some of this stuff more or less, propaganda to make them seem scarier than they were, or did they really have something going that they never got a chance to unleash? I've heard stories that they never did it because the crafts were way too expensive and they didn't want one to get popped. I don't know if that's, bourgeois or whatever. So I'm going to ask you first and then you, Andy. What about this? I mean, were the Nazis that far advanced? Is there enough credible information to suggest that they really were out of this world? Or was it kind of like a hooga-boogie stuff to get everybody nervous?
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead, Andy.
I threw that to you, Larry, first. And then
okay. I think they were pretty advanced, and I think they had help. This is just my opinion, but I based that on a couple of statements made by Hermann Oberth, who was a man who worked with an engineer who worked with Wernher von Braun and Wernher von Braun. Oberth said that there was a extraterrestrial, if you like, connection. He said in an article in actually a book, Did Spacemen Colonize the Earth? Anyway, they have a quote from him. We cannot take credit for our record advancement in certain scientific fields alone. We have been helped. When asked by whom, he replied, the peoples of other worlds. And then in June of 1959, Wernher von Braun made a statement that in a news magazine in Europe called News Europa, and where he said, we find ourselves faced by powers which are far stronger than we had hitherto assumed, and whose base is at present unknown to us. More I cannot say at present. We are now engaged in entering into closer contact with those powers, and in 6 or 9 months it may be possible to speak with some precision on the matter. Well, that kind of indicates to me that from my worldview, I believe they were in contact with interdimensional creatures, and I believe that those interdimensional creatures were of the demonic type, and I believe that they helped the Nazis with this technology. And there are credible reports that they did have saucers, flying saucers, if you like, at the end of the war. And there was an article in Der Spiegel magazine in March of 1950 where Rudolf Schreiber, who was a engineer, and he says, Rudolf Schreiber, who says engineers throughout the world experimented in the early 1940s with flying saucers, is willing to build one for the United States in 6 to 9 months. The 40-year-old Prague University graduate said he made blueprints for such a machine, which he calls a flying top, before Germany's collapse, and that the blueprints were stolen from his laboratory. He says the machines would be capable of 2,600 miles per hour with a radius of 4,000 miles. And his claims were backed up after his death in the late 50s. Papers were found amongst his belongings, which revealed that he did have a great deal of notes and some blueprints and several newspaper clippings of himself and this alleged flying saucer. So I believe that they did have this technology. It was probably considerably less advanced than it would be now after 60-some-odd years. But that's my opinion. That's my belief based on the type of evidence that I just gave you.
That's interesting. I mean, that's what's kind of been on my mind. Andy, what about that? I mean, what have you come across that might back up what Larry's saying, or even something else?
Well, I agree. I basically agree, and I think the differences would be semantics or the way you would phrase it, because the thing that interdimensional beings affected the development of UFOs can be inferred easily just because Hitler had all these occultists doing stuff for him, and people can make that leap. But it kind of comes from the Tesla story, because he actually did hear voices. Well, Hitler did too, but Tesla's the only one who really had the brains to figure this stuff out. So that's why I think he is the person who figured it out. And he did hear voices or communicate somehow with aliens. That the details of which I can't remember what they were described as or anything, but it's similar. What I was saying when I first came up or rediscovered, this meme about Nazi saucers. It's been around since the war, and people that are around then, most recently Rod McKenzie, that writer who claims to have been somehow involved in the JFK thing, was saying that in the late 40s it was common knowledge that these were Nazi craft. And he was interested in it at the time and had books about it that he picked up, like when he was in the Army going over to, overseas. And that was just kind of a common thing. But they fought it all along the way and tried to reframe it continually as ET technology. So it continues to be pushed away and then rediscovered. And I think it's just not an answer for everything. It definitely applies to some of these craft, and it definitely applies to the Mothman story, because I think those craft were of that design, or were the next generation of those designs.
I got a question. It seems to me that if this was going somewhere out of the 40s, where did it go? This bit about communication and cooperation, if you want to call it that, between we terrestrials and, I guess you're saying, extraterrestrials or spirit beings or whatever, it seems to have, we hear talk about it, this whole thing during the Eisenhower period. I just don't know. I kind of felt like that was baloney. Maybe it's not. But where did this stuff go? Because it just didn't seem like it continued to some conclusion, unless that time is yet to come.
Where did the Nazi technology go?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like all of a sudden, this is all ready to go, and it was almost used on their enemies.
Well, what happened was it got split up between the Allies.
And Russia?
The Russians got some of it, the British got some of it, we got some of it. I don't know. Did France get anything? Maybe. I don't know.
Look at them. I doubt it.
But
sorry.
But it got split up, and they didn't really have. I mean, it sounds crazy, but how we invade other countries and just do stuff, like with the drones that we're sending everywhere now. But apparently, corporations like to have agreements about things, and so they really wanted to have the patents and all the rights to build these so that they could milk the defense treasury trough. So it took them a while to take guys like Schautberger and hold them up for a couple of years until they cracked and signed the paperwork over to them. And then by that time, it was about 1960. And then in a short time, they had, you had these waves of UFOs all around the Ohio Valley, where I think these things were being built again, the new generation. I think it's dovetailed into what we have today with the drones. Suddenly, these things are flying all over the place, and they want to have, Homeland Security wants to have several hundred, immediately. And, they're going to be trying to fly them over the Adirondacks this year, supposedly as, to test them out. But, once you give them that ability, they're going to be flying these things everywhere, and it's just going to be 1984.
All right, we got to get Andy Sr. and Herb Smith to sit on their roofs up there and watch for this stuff. But what about this whole deal with Eisenhower? I'm going to throw it to you first, Andy, and Larry, if you want to pipe in on that, by all means. I mean, we've all read stuff. I can't even tell you where it comes from. I looked at it, was like, okay, great. And I wonder about it, but it seems kind of, like I said, bullshit. But do we really believe that there was some kind of understanding between whoever and whatever and Eisenhower's administration? And, of course, obviously that was the beginning of Area 51 as well. Can we believe that stuff that our government knew right then and there?
Is that to me or Larry?
That's to you first.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think we knew everything that was, yeah.
Geez, if that didn't give Ike a heart attack, I don't know what would.
Well, no, I think he knew that they were Nazi craft. Is that what you meant?
What I'm asking is, yeah, that, and also apparently some of the information I read, and I'm sorry I can't be more specific. It shows you how much I gave credence to it, but it still sticks in the back of your mind, and that is, that Eisenhower's I guess, they got the yada-yada from these extraterrestrials, and we can all kind of like get along together.
No, I think he knew they came from Germany, and that's why he gave the speech about the military-industrial complex, because that's who he was referring to, the IG Farbens, the companies that were building these craft and developing the technology today that we see now being deployed and just accepted as if it came out of nowhere. It's like, does anybody ask, where did these things come from? How long did it take? What's the history of the development of these drone craft?
Right.
And they always just show the ones that look like airplanes or bugs. They don't show the ones that look like these craft that have landed all over the place and abducted people and things. So.
All right, Larry, you want to pipe in on it?
Can I finish? There was something I wanted to say, and I don't know if I got it out, was that I had, as soon as I revisited this idea that Nazi craft were responsible for the Ohio Valley UFO sightings, I started hearing immediately from that, the ETs gave Hitler the idea. He got him for the ETs, and or somehow somebody mentioned it, and then so I started predicting this might be the next meme that would be used by the ETers to keep you believing in the ETs. And I think they can do it with Tesla too. They can say Tesla got his ideas from the ETs, but Tesla, he invented a lot of great things that have totally changed our lives, and it really becomes a question of, does every advance bring an unfortunate backlash or problem?
All right, Larry, and I'm sorry for cutting you off there, Andy.
It becomes abstract for me. It becomes a cosmic question, whether or not these are interdimensional beings or not, that are influencing people and giving them ideas, which is kind of, what I've been saying with Mothman, is that if he is a Garuda, then he is actively involved or an archetype of the enlightenment process. So it does seem that they affect people, and the question becomes, does this particular being help or hurt us? And it's kind of hard to say. If you, like, the atomic bomb was thought to be the greatest thing ever, and then Oppenheimer's like, no, it's going to be the worst thing ever. And sometimes it's like that. It's what seems good is bad, and what seems bad is good. It's hard to say.
Okay, Larry?
Well, I'm glad that he mentioned the atomic bomb, because that's what I was going to talk about. Is the author of probably the Bible on the atomic bomb is Robert Jung, who wrote Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, and he said this about UFOs. The first of these flying saucers, as they were later called, circular in shape, with a diameter of some 45 yards, were built by the specialists Schreiber, Habermohl, and Meithe. They were first airborne on February 14, 1945, over Prague, and reached in 3 minutes a height of nearly 8 miles. They had a speed of 1,250 miles per hour, which was doubled in subsequent tests. So I think from that is a very mainstream book, and I think from that it would have to be known to the higher ups in the government and the military, and especially in intelligence, that the Nazis were working on this sort of thing. And there's also a CIA agent, Virgil Armstrong, in that book who commented, we know that in the early parts of the war there were certain factions of the Allied forces that did not believe he had a secret weapon, and it wasn't until the Americans made much emphasis on this that they began to look at it seriously, and indeed did discover that Hitler not only had a secret weapon, he had what we would call today a UFO or spacecraft. And also, one other thing, we were talking about the occult as involved with UFOs. And I know in the early part of this series we talked quite a bit about the Vril Society, which was a secret society within the Thule Society or Thule Society. And many people, I've read several sources that say that the Vril Society was very actively engaged in trying to develop a spacecraft. The reason for that is supposedly, and I'm just saying this is what they said, they were channeling messages from an ancient civilization, an alien civilization, which was in another solar system called the Aldebaran solar system. And they had planned to develop a craft that would make contact with these people. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've read that from several sources. So again, we see the work of the secret societies. It is known that the Brill Society was interested in and had made some effort to produce a spacecraft. That's all I had to say.
No. I'm stepping on everybody's toes today, so I just want to be a little bit slow on the trigger. One of the things I'm wondering about too now, and that is if the Nazis, for whatever reason, their Germanic roots, I don't know, were that, I guess, invested by the evil side, I'm wondering if what that all was about, the Third Reich, was a test run for something that's coming later. In other words, if they wanted to, I don't know exactly who they is, but, and we could call it Satan, we could call it evil. If they wanted to run the table, then they could have, but they just went ahead and used a twerp like Hitler, imbued him, and then just saw how far he could get, and they finally threw him on the ash pile. That making sense to anybody? That's a jump ball.
Sure, it's making plenty of sense to me. I think the Third Reich was nothing more than a dress rehearsal for what you and I and most people involved with us would call the New World Order. I don't really like using that term because it gets bandied about a lot and it's kind of hard to define, but I believe it was a dress rehearsal for what they believe will be the final totalitarian world government. And I believe that this was all part and parcel of that movement toward world government and through a series of 3 world wars.
Andy, your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. Sounds good.
What are you doing? You fixing somebody's bicycle or something over there? Or what? Oh, I don't know that disrespect is bouncing off the walls.
No. You accuse me in every show of doing something.
But I'm right. Yeah, whenever, hey, listen, with all the years that we've done this, and the prolix and the circuitous and the lengthy responses we've given each other, it's like when you start going, yeah, I concur, I know something's up. Oh, so anyway. All right, but I kind of a little hesitant to draw you on the spiritual sides of things, and maybe that's just me. But you've just heard what we've had to say. I mean, in your schema, your view of things, based quite a bit, on reality, the truth.
Somewhat on reality, yes.
Yes, virtual and reality. What do you make out of the Reich? I mean, and of course, this is something that we don't usually talk about. But, I mean, who were those guys?
Well, it's funny because I really was concurring because I was just talking with somebody last night about this, that the difference between Hitler, a guy standing on the podium ranting about Jews or whoever, was so different than the process that was occurring behind the scenes, even before they invaded other countries. Their corporations already had corporate agreements in other countries controlling they controlled what carbide could output in certain ways. So during the war, they had carbide not making anything, a particular minerals and things, and then yet they were doing them all over there so that they could give Germany the advantage. This kind of behavior doesn't have anything to do with radical, race baiting. It's all paperwork, and it's what I was saying before with the saucers. The paperwork matters to these guys because that's how you get your money. It's how you get paid. Yeah, but I totally agree that they were just using some race baiting that they'd used before. It worked. It's worked here. It had worked here before, and it came from here. In fact, from Indiana. More or less.
Well,
but I was, and go ahead.
No, you started first. Go ahead.
I was getting ready to take off on a wild tangent, and I better not go there.
Hey, Larry, you ready for a wild tangent?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to hear what Andy had to say. That was the whole point of asking you if you could invite him on, because it's just fascinating. I wanted to ask him also about Mothman being an interdimensional creature and Mothman possibly being a guardian angel. I don't know if he would couch it in those terms, but I find it really interesting.
I have couched it in those terms because a lot of things point to that. It almost points to a Christ-like or messianic thing. But on the other hand, people, the descriptions of Mothman, and the fact that you might have him at a vortex kind of in a vortex situation where he's seen and then other things are seen. You don't know if this is a phenomenon that can shapeshift or not. So then it appears as good, bad, et cetera, et cetera. Then then what do you do with that? I mean, well, what if that's what's going on here?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It really gets to the root of human consciousness, how good and evil, exist together, coexist side by side. Each advance can bring a decline. I mean, it's some strange. It's the riddle of nirvana. Why can nirvana exist next to hell or samsara? And they apparently exist in the same dimension.
Well, doesn't it say in Scripture, Larry, that apparently hell will be inside of heaven?
I've never really understood that. I believe that that there are two different areas, obviously, but I've never really understood exactly where hell exists and where heaven exists. I've read quite a bit about it, but that's an awful big question. I couldn't approach it.
But what Andy was talking about reminded me of that, because there's scriptures that said, "And you will be inside of it and never have it." I mean, that was an adjuration.
Well, I think it all goes back to what we were pointing out earlier, or talking about earlier, is dimensional, inner dimensions.
Exactly,
and,
right.
I mean, I know that in the Bible it plainly lets us know that there's more than one dimension. There are many dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
The dimension that we exist on, we as humans on the earth, the way we exist, the angels and the demons, exist in other dimensions, and they can come through into this dimension, and that's one of the reasons why New Age people are so heavy into, channeling and trying to bring these, which they believe to be, all good, and I think they missed the point that they're both good and evil.
But don't you get the feeling, Larry, sometimes that we are the only ones who don't go, back and forth?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, the Apostle Paul, in Ephesians, we were talking about it the other day. The quote that, "For now we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness, in high places." I just paraphrased that, but it's quite obvious to me that all the evil that is done in this world is not just human. It's not just of human origin.
No.
Because, I mean, look at the Holocaust and what the Nazis did to the people in those concentration camps. I mean, it's possible, it was just human beings who, were, deranged, but it was just a little too much for me to believe that was all of human origin, that it was, just the ideas of human beings. I think it goes into spiritual evil, and I definitely believe in spiritual evil as well as spiritual good.
The Nazis were tapping into an ancient well of evil.
Yeah.
And where it's all somehow gets collected up into a nice little, concentrated whatever. And
I think the secret societies are the key to it all. I think the secret societies and their machinations are behind much of the evil and much of the political and economic events in the world. I definitely believe that.
Let's remember too that it seems that wanton murder psychotic behavior seems to be pretty prevalent. And I say that because we look to the Nazis and the way they did things, but we also kind of give, I'm not saying we're giving them passes, but we don't look as heavily in other areas where this took place. I mean, you look at the Armenian genocide that nobody knows about.
Right.
You take a look at what we did to the native peoples here on 2 occasions, stopping only to kill each other in the Civil War. And it goes on and on. I mean, you know that situation also with the Serbs, I guess, and it was what? Was it the Bosnians? Or the Croats? I'm sorry, I don't want to besmirch the wrong people here. Or
well, you had the Muslims, and the Serbs who were Orthodox Christians, and the
Ustashi, wasn't it?
Yeah. I'm trying to the Croats who were Roman Catholic.
Okay, there you go.
And they, Croatia at one time was a protectorate of the Reich, and it was run by Croatian Nazis.
Well, then you know the story also. They said what they did to the Serbs made the SS puke.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
They couldn't believe the level of brutality.
So barbarity never really seems to get any more sophisticated. It seems such because of technology. But the spirit, it's like a murderous spirit that overtakes somebody, and it's like you can't stop it unless you kill it or do something to it. And, I'm laughing now because I'm thinking of like the old Star Treks. And I'm thinking that there's people, entities that are looking at the globe and like saying, look, I can start a war over here. Watch this. You know what I mean? And just playing with us. And
I think greed is the intermediate state between that and barbarism is the greed part, because the Nazis would make agreements with the banks of the countries before they invaded. So that stuff was all figured out. The paperwork was all done. And that's what I was kind of getting at before with the level of the organization that was behind it. And that organization was driven by greed, thinking that they could appropriate all these vast sums of money and objects.
Well, if you look at the 2 biggest corporations, or probably the biggest corporations at that time in the United States and Germany, it was Standard Oil here and IG Farben in Germany, and they essentially became the same company in the 1920s with the Standard IG agreement. And the synthetic gasoline that was produced in Germany, had a lot of help from Standard Oil. And, IG Farben had the knowledge, had the technical knowledge that was more advanced than what Standard Oil had. And Standard Oil had the capital. And so it was a marriage made in hell. They got together and made an agreement. And IG Farben was the most powerful corporation in Germany and was responsible for helping Hitler and the Nazi Party make it to the top, along with many other corporations. I mean, the big banks, both financial and industrial capital in the United States and England and other countries, all basically chipped in to help the Nazis come to power, along with German corporations, and they were all interlocked. It's all big corporate oligarchy when you get down to it.
Isn't it interesting? I think all 3 of us are aware of this, that it was reported that the Nazis were working basically with synthetic gas. And in fact, it's reported that when Patton was chasing the Germans back into Germany and he was running out of resources, that they were actually using the gas from the abandoned and destroyed tanks and trucks and such, so that he could keep chasing them. And it's like, did anybody hear that? Did anybody read that? And I mean, here we are, like, wondering about oil and petroleum and all this stuff. And here they had synthetic gas back in the 40s, and nobody says a word about it now. I mean, the amnesia is incredible. Yeah,
coal hydrogenation, it's very expensive and it's very dirty, but it's what the Nazis used, and these plants were built by IG Farben and with help from Standard Oil. And that's how the Nazis supplied their war machine toward the end, when they couldn't get the resources, they couldn't get regular crude oil. They would take coal and make synthetic gasoline from that, and it works. And it's been around since the 1920s. That technology has been there.
Well, it was even earlier, apparently, that they had
synthetic.
That they were squeezing the coal, which is. And they started doing that in my neck of the woods. there, and across the river from Institute, where they made the synthetic stuff during the war. I was going to mention. I saw a photo. There's a photo in the Charleston Daily Mail archives of workers. A huge throng of workers making the synthetic rubber and gas. And I think it was for 1943, but I can't remember the date exactly. But I think we weren't supposed to be producing much of that then. I think that was one of those agreements I was talking to before,
right,
which is mentioned in that book, The Irregulars, which is the carbide or standard was kept from making that stuff by their agreements with Farben. But yet, why do we have a picture showing them making it? That's what my question. Where was this stuff going? Was it going to Germany too?
Mm.
It may well have been.
And then this is the plant. In Germany, the saucer base was supposedly Dora, which was making the synthetic stuff as a front.
Yes.
And they may have been doing the same thing in Institute. The front was all the making of this synthetic stuff, but it was really they were working on these saucers. Because the MJ12 and the aviary have been implicated in Institute in some of the studies sponsored by the West Virginia State University there. So that's where the old aviary. Now we have the micro aviary, which is the little drones. They're calling those the micro aviary. So that tells you that the previous aviary was really probably about drone making the larger drones.
You mentioned this twice, and it's a really good point. I just want to chime in on this. Emails that get sent to me from folks, and sometimes you find a pattern that occurs there. And one of the things that is recurrent is the miniaturizing and the lethal capacity of the drones that they are making. You can have anything from a couple of inches in size to a couple of feet that are carrying two twisters on it, and it's amazing. I understand now why, to a certain extent, if we're going to get into a smackdown on the Eurasian continent, that maybe that American military people believe that they don't really need boots on the ground that much. If you hear what I'm saying, that they can pull military back, and all they got to do is pretty much run the robots. Anybody want to address that at all?
Well, I don't think it's any question that there's some very advanced aircraft. I have some personal knowledge of that from previous work experience, but I learned during that experience that there's a lot of things that are going on in places like Area 51 in particular, where very advanced aircraft and very advanced weapon systems are worked on. They're that's where they perfect them, and I wouldn't doubt that they have some very advanced laser weapons, and maybe the means of delivering those weapons might be what we would generically call flying saucers. Really don't know. That's just what I think, based on assumptions.
There's a rumor that there's a connection between the TNT area in Point Pleasant and the Area 51, and that maybe some of the equipment got moved out there or something, or when the TNT shut down, they kind of moved it out there. I guess is the basic rumor.
And I never asked you about this directly, by the way, but Andy, you got any take on Wright-Patterson?
Like the center of a lot of the stuff, I guess. A lot of the happenings.
Well, I'll say, to me, it's the strangest Air Force base east of the Mississippi.
Yeah, that Mounds Lab has gotten me interested. Over there near Wright-Pat that they may have been involved in. They seem to have been involved in killing somebody in MLK's family, his mother, and maybe,
right.
It got me thinking about whether or not some of these guys in Point Pleasant were involved in planning the MLK and RFK hits, and were some of the Men in Black incidents were testing out patsies. Because there was some connection to. What's that?
I would definitely believe that there's some mind control, possibly the use of drugs, et cetera, involved with the activities that you're talking about, and the possibility of mind-controlled assassins. I know that the guy who was supposed to be the father of space medicine was a Nazi, Hubertus Strughold. He worked for NASA for many years, and he also worked on some of the Project Paperclip experiments where they used drugs and mind control techniques on people.
Yeah, he had a connection to Ohio State, so he would have probably worked with the Air Force at Wright Pat or was perhaps involved in Mothman.
Also, that might explain why the Collins brothers are the way they are. That's a cheap shot, and I admit it.
But I don't know if you got that article I sent you, Viz, about Lawrence Rockefeller, but
I did.
There was a mention of Minneapolis in there and Medtronics and how some of their equipment sounds like the alien abduction equipment and stuff. But the Jello man in black that was seen in West Virginia, I think it was him who drove the white Mustang rented out of Minneapolis, which sounds like a setup on James Earl Ray coming out of Minneapolis.
There you go.
Raoul thing, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's there's two or three things like that in the story that make you think, hey, they were trying to set some people up, and one of them, a guy named Tiny, a man in black, a letter was recently discovered that was written to Kiel by a guy in England who had hung out with this Tiny guy, and he turned out to be sort of a neo-Nazi guy who may have been exhibiting Charlie Manson-like programming.
All right, I have a question now that kind of departs a bit. Before I do that, does anybody want to prevent me from doing that?
No.
All right, here's what I'm wondering about. It started with Charles Wilcox educating me, really, he sent me a couple of tapes of what the Canadians were doing with the Avro, or the Arrow. Now, one of the things that was interesting is in this documentary, here in a parade, the Canadians are going down the road, their military, in a hovercraft. Pretty interesting. I mean, this is like in the 50s and 60s or somewhere around there. Also, they did have the most advanced, I guess, fighter plane. Are we talking now about the Arrow that broke what Mach? I can't remember. And all of a sudden, it seemed like whether it was JPL and or NASA grabbed those scientists and brought them to the United States. And I'm not going to say it's the last we heard of them, but they no longer were doing anything for Canada. Is anybody aware of that episode? And how does that figure into what we're talking about, this continuum of Nazi technology into the Northern Hemisphere?
Well, the British had the best intel on the Nazis and probably, were using it in that way, to try out the Avro.
You think they were slipping it to the Canadians?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it ended up in West Virginia.
Doesn't everything?
because there's these photos of the Avro from I don't know what year. Do you know? 56 something? 8?
It was I tell you, the only thing I remember is that this whole thing went down during Eisenhower's administration. So we're looking at what, 54 to 6? No, what was it? We're talking about 52 to 60. Okay.
Because by the time of Mothman, Gray Barker is writing in a Silver Bridge about a guy who's working on the Avro in West Virginia.
Okay.
Andy, if I could ask you a question about alien abductions, what do you believe about that? Do you think these are actual abductions, or do you believe that it's some kind of mind control program, or what?
Or a little of both?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is a little bit of both. There's a natural phenomenon where people can easily imagine that alien face, either by taking drugs or being hit with electromagnetism or whatever. And so that's an archetypal thing. And I've never experienced something that I would go say was real. Like, I don't understand what's going on with these people, because it's not something that happens to me. I don't quite understand how you could confabulate a whole experience like that from like while you're falling asleep or whatever, or going into to a trance. I don't even know if I'm a very good hypnotic subject or not, actually.
I can tell you from experience, you're not. Let me ask you, though, real quickly. I don't know what this means. I had an abduction dream where I don't know that I was abducted, but I got the sentiment of, I mean, all of us know what it's like to have the fear in you, like before you get into a fist fight or something like that when you're a kid. You get that thing happening, and it's that
adrenaline.
Yeah, it's the taste in the mouth and the the heat in your lungs. Yeah, and I had that, like, I know it was only a dream, so you shouldn't have all these sensory things going on, but I remember myself running from a spot where there was the classic searchlight kind of thing, a little cone of light down there, saying, "My God, it's real." Now, I don't know. It was very real to me, and yet I wondered, like, gee, did that really ever happen to me? And I let it go at that. Now, Andy, you've heard a lot more. You've dealt with more anecdotes with people who have told you stuff. Do you think some people are running with this? I mean, obviously there's a lunatic fringe, but is there something, at least there's a kernel of truth about it, like everything it seems with the UFOs, that, yeah, you know what, some of this stuff is real and all the rest is there for smoke and mirrors?
Well, I think people can be visited by spirit beings, but it's similar. It's a similar thing to the alien thing. They can, things can come in your room while you're sleeping and all that. And so part of it, I think, is that. And they, with all the media that's out there trying to convince people to believe in ETs, they can easily take those experiences and run with them and really make it more real than it is. Because it obviously isn't something that exists in our daily reality for any length of time that people can really come together on and say, yeah, this is happening. It's obviously exists in some other mental space or something. But I do think that, some people were really abducted by these Nazi doctors and made to believe that it was alien.
That's exactly what I think.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
But all of them obviously can't be that. But
no.
Enough of them were that it necessitated the cover story that it was ETs.
Right. I think they're heavy on using the ETs, and I think that that's going to become apparent to us that at some point that this is some kind of like a major worldwide mind control op.
Mm-hmm.
The ETs have come now. They're going to show us how to live, And I think Scientology is big on that. I think Scientology is nothing more than a tremendous mind control operation and run by some very evil people as well.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Mormons, with the believing in the...
oh, you're going to get mail.
Believing in the aliens at the heart of their... thing there. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't buy into any of that, and I do believe in interdimensional creatures, and I do believe that demonic presences are involved with what people believe are ETs abducting them, or ETs speaking to them, whatever. I really believe that it's a disguise. Mm-hmm. I mean, this down through history in the Bible, it talks about a certain phenomenon that demonic presences can appear to be many different things. They can mimic whatever a person wants to. It's just like seances where grandpa comes back to talk to somebody, and the Bible tells us that that's a demon, disguising himself as a departed loved one.
It does seem to be a top-down process to some degree, though, with the evil. Like, it's not like it can be greatly stimulated by those with authority. And if you look at authority figures, the only ones that can really pull together these different areas that show up or showing up, like cattle mutilations, UFOs, abductions, the medical aspect of abductions, crop circles, mind control, occult interests like Masonic secret society. That's all Rockefeller territory, and specifically Lawrence. So, I mean, that's, I sent Biz that article, and I think that was sort of the message of the article, is that this is the guy that pulls together all those pieces and has the money and has actually spent money on all of those.
Lawrence has since passed, has he not? I believe he has, just recently. Within the last couple of years?
I think so.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, David's the last of the sons, and now they've got, their offspring to carry the ball. But you don't hear too much about him. Stephen, to a certain extent. But, Lawrence was a heavy hitter, but I believe he's gone, whatever that means.
You got to wonder who took over the reins of that particular part of it.
You don't hear too much about their spawn, what they're doing.
No, I mean, it's David is the last, and but I will say, too, that it seemed to me that when Stephen's name popped up, it has a lot to do with environmentalism. I think he was pushing for the 10 Commandments of, ecology and their own Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, the Georgia Guidestones.
We should check, though, because one of the Rockefellers recently put a bunch of money toward crop circle research, and I'm thinking that would have had to be Lawrence, unless it was David.
All right.
Can't really see David doing that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Larry. No, I was going to say
one thing that I've always thought was very odd as far as these alien abductions are these weird sexual experiments that they perform on these people. Which, if they're if these are ETs and they're from, some planet, Xenon or whatever, what are they doing experimenting on human beings? Wouldn't they have a more advanced way of doing it other than probing into people's sexual organs?
Well, they got the Playboy Channel, too.
Well, maybe it was just some of these guys that had these crafts they could fly around in, or if they just came in vans and then convinced the witness that it had been a UFO. I mean, what if they were just occasionally wanted to rape somebody?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. These weird, sadistic, creepy sexual experimentations, I think it's just a way of covering sexual abuse of human beings, and that's what it looks like to me.
It just shows you that Craigslist is intergalactic. I'm so pithy today. But there's something I want to ask, and for me this will end it, Andy. Again, we thank you for your time. But the one thing that really does get me about the whole UFO and related incidences and whatever, sectors, facets, aspects, it all seems that there is something there, and then the rest is all just, like Larry was saying, whether it was distraction or falderal, but you know what I mean? It's like, okay, here's where I'm going at. When I had my episode in Vermont, the thing looked like a classic UFO from a movie. Roundish, light on top, light on the bottom, a circumferential light with a light that went around in that. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, holy mackerel. Okay, I went through the story about how I went on the air that night at a college station and talked about next day Boston Globe, sightings from West Virginia, well, why not, through the Northeast. My wife and I had an episode in '85 in Jersey where we saw what you would call a dirigible type that went by. It was huge. And I'm like, why? They obviously don't care, whoever they are, that this stuff gets seen, and I almost think they want it to be to a certain extent. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You know where I'm going, so take it.
Yeah, you asked me this last time. That's why I cut in there, because I know where you're going.
But I got Alzheimer's, so of course I don't remember that.
But, well, you stated it, differently, so it works.
Thanks for bailing me on that, babe.
Yeah.
But no, go ahead. I mean, so what is the deal? I mean, it's like, you want to be seen. There's no two ways about it.
I just think we're being set up. We're being set up for some big revelation about our space brothers who are coming here to save us from ourselves. And I don't know how that's going to be worked out, but it looks that way to me.
Andy.
The beginning of the phenomenon dovetails nicely with the beginning of TV, and I think once they realized they had the TV, they rolled this thing out because this was how you could roll back gains that have been made in unions and standard of living, and all that stuff that happened in the previous 2 decades. It was not only distracted from all that, but, broke people's minds open. So you create a trance situation in a large number of people who've seen these things, and then you start pumping out the indoctrination from the TV. That's what I think it is, ultimately. It's a way to entrance people.
Okay, I lied. I got one last question for you, but it's your fault because you made me think about it. But Larry, you're gonna have an opinion on this as well.
Okay.
A lot has been made about chemtrails. Personally, I don't believe that they're made to make us sick. I believe that is collateral damage and an ancillary effect. But I don't believe that it's for any mass anything in that way. But the one thing that I do consider is if this is metallicizing a certain level in space, whether or not this is also going to factor into some kind of holographic, a major episode in the sky.
It means for projecting an image.
There you go. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
Well,
I think they'll probably go for fake asteroid maybe. I don't know.
Well, the other thing I think about, and this could be true also in preparation for what might be the final World War, and Trudeau actually, I have the credit for that, whether you like what he said or not, it's not me, but I kind of think it makes sense. He had said to me at times, too, when he was watching chemtrails, I guess through a bird or something like that, he felt that it might actually be a shield against what would become EMP barrages, and that would stop it. The fact that a lot of people are ingesting heavy metals is not a good thing, but after all, who gives a shit about us? What about the possibility that it could be in preparation for a kind of war we've never seen before?
Yeah, I definitely think that's part of the deal, is that they've got satellites now that can shoot laser weapons.
Yeah. Are we in all agreement, by the way, can I take a poll here, that the Star Wars initiative and all that other stuff that never supposedly happened under Reagan did in fact happen? Can I get a yay or a nay on that one?
Yay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it happened.
Yeah.
It's just that it happened in secret. I remember years ago working on a program where the aircraft in this program were experimental, and they were the result, of certain radar-absorbing materials, and it took a very long time before people were able to see this aircraft for what it was, but before that, they were reporting it all over the western United States that they were seeing UFOs. Mm-hmm. Well, they were seeing an unidentified flying object, but it was an aircraft, a military aircraft from the Air Force.
All right, Larry, if it's okay with you, Annie, we'll cut you loose. We thank you for being with us. If you got a parting comment, by all means, let us have it. Otherwise, we thank you for the time that you borrowed there from your domestic situation to be with us. We really thank you for that. So you got a final comment, let us have it, or otherwise it's goodbye.
Well, I could plug the new version of the Mothman Speaks. The one that came out has a problem with the index, so we're going to be just for those who bought it and they're wondering why some of the index features don't work.
What I'd like to know is that with subsequent editions, that thing is going to be as big as like the Oxford English Dictionary. How do you do it?
Well, what do you mean, with the series or?
Yeah. I mean, my wife looked at it and she said, "Oh my God."
What looked at what? The Mothman Speaks?
Yes. Yeah. Now let's get this straight too. Yeah. You know what? You get to plug it. That's okay. I mean, that should be the way it is. And because the website isn't, like up to date necessarily, at least thus far, you've told me it isn't. Why don't you lay on us what's coming out so we get that straight?
Yeah, that's coming out, a new version of the Mothman's Photographer 3, which is the big one. It's almost 600 pages. It's got a lot of the Garuda, Thunderbird, Charlie Manson interview stuff, Walter Bauert, who really was probably person who first wrote about mind control, and then later in his life started saying that UFOs were part of that.
Mm-hmm.
He's got an interview in there. That's been an index has been put onto that too. So that'll be good for researching all the different crazy references that are in that book. And the Mothman Speaks 2 is coming out real soon. We've got the Men in Black Secret Terror book, which kind of puts a new light on the Men in Black situation in Point Pleasant. And I really think that whole deal with Mothman, at least with the Men in Black, did have to do with Lawrence Rockefeller, because was the scion of aerospace, exotic aerospace technology, other than Howard Hughes. And, maybe, I don't know what the relationship was between those two guys, but Onassis is rumored to have taken over the Hughes empire through the money that he got from Standard Oil, from the contracts of carrying their oil around. So it may be that Lawrence put Hughes out of business. But, this is the guy that appears to have controlled the TNT area, and Carbide was really the only corporation allowed to buy and sell parts of the TNT, when they were dismantling it. They actually took out a lot of the equipment. So, we now have a definite link between Carbide and the TNT, which we really didn't quite have before. And Carbide would be the best candidate for doing the UFO stuff, because they had the only other plant similar to the one in Germany where the saucers were supposedly being built. Not the ones in Prague were kind of a different deal, but the ones in Germany matched up with Carbide's facility in the area in which all the Mothman stuff happened. And it's almost like Mothman just wanted to throw a wrench in their game somehow. So, I've said before that it might be some kind of ancient archetype trying to fight back, because a lot of the Standard Oil facilities were built on the mound areas where these creatures tend to like to inhabit.
Let me ask you something. I'm going to take a wild guess. Do you remember when a listener years ago sent us a snapshot from a bird, and it showed the proximity of the CSX railroad to, was it a Carbide plant? Do you remember that?
A picture?
Well, yeah. I mean, however we got it, we could find, whether it was through Google Maps, if you remember, it showed the proximity of the CSX railroad next to one of the facilities that you've always spoken about. And I've not forgotten that. I didn't know if you remembered it at all.
Well, the BASF plant, right?
There you go.
Which used to be Standard Ultramarine in Chauncey, Ohio, which is up near Athens, which is in the direction really of Indrid Cold, where he used to fly a saucer and meet Woody Derenberger. And then Standard moved to Huntington, and I think took over the BASF factory.
Yeah, and that's where the photo was, wasn't it, in Huntington?
Yeah, and someone was speculating that they would lock people up in the chemical plants, because chemical plants, I'm taking this a little further, they're fenced in, they have razor wire and all that. They have the gases if they wanted to, they can make people work the chemical plants. It'd be one of the first things I think you'd do in a totalitarian situation, and that's what the Nazis were doing, was having these, slave workers work around this dangerous stuff. And
yeah, that was a precedent right there.
Right. So what we're looking at, and I think I think it was a she, so I'll just say that. I think that what she was intimating also is that are we looking at exactly what took place in Germany and Poland, get on the train car.
Yeah, I think it's possible. They'd have to cook up more, I don't know, they'd have to create a bigger internal enemy. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that'll come.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you, Helm.
It's me.
Yeah.
It's you and me.
It's you and me. So, at any rate, but listen, thanks, obviously, putting the time in. And I just want you to know also, and everyone else, that on July 3rd at 6 Central Time, we're going to have a marathon of Grassy Knoll shows. They're all they're all, recorded. There's nothing I'm doing live. But it's starting at 6 on the 3rd and will go until its completion sometime after 6 p.m. Central on July 4th. The reason I bring it up is because one of the audios is of you, Andy, with Robert Denton, and that was one of the good ones. So I want you to know that that's coming up. But I put it at a time at 2 a.m. so no one can hear it. Just because I love you, man.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm sure there'll be some people up, to catch that.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking there's probably somebody from Romulus or something that'll be up there listening.
Lanulos.
Lanulos, there you go.
All right. Thanks, Biz.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you, Andy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Andy.
He's gone. No. And we can take this a little bit further if you want to. If you got any summary comments you'd like to make as far as where we went with all this, by all means, this is the time, Larry.
Well, I think Andy kind of reflected my thoughts on most of this. And as far as I'm concerned, I believe the UFOs are of both terrestrial origin, and also I believe that they are involved with interdimensional beings. And in my case, I believe in the demonic, and I think Andy does too. I really wasn't sure, spiritually, Andy is not, on the same page as I am, but doesn't mean anything one way or another. But I was really, really impressed with some of the things he was saying. Were just basically kind of echoing what I believed, and I was really pleased with that.
Yeah, there was no way you would know that, but that wasn't really the issue. The thing is, you wanted to have a give and take with him, and it
Right.
certainly worked out. And I'll be honest with you, I was surprised too that you guys were as similar in some of your thoughts that you were. Yeah, thank you for toddling on with me, and we'll see you probably in another week or two when we'll continue We Are What We Hated, which is getting to be more and more appropriate. Is it not?
Okay.
Bye.
Hey, good talking to you, bud.